Hey, high school literacy leaders. This is DLC Foster Yankee, and I would like to welcome you to Curriculum Chats. This series of videos is intended for campus leaders, substitutes, special education teachers, really anyone who is going into the classroom, say to participate in or observe instruction, and needs to know the lesson, but doesn't have time to click around Odell and figure it out. So, in these videos, I'll be discussing these lessons through the lens of someone outside of the classroom and sharing some suggestions and look fors. So, let's get started. In this video, I'll be discussing the first lesson in the first section of the Alexander Hamilton unit. The purpose of section 1 is to have students build their own understanding of the plot and characters in Hamilton, the musical, in an authentic way by listening to the music, summarizing the plot, and analyzing who Alexander Hamilton is. Here are the goals, TEKS, and ELPs for this lesson, courtesy of our curriculum. Some highlights are students are establishing the purpose for studying Hamilton, an American musical. They will watch two videos of Miranda's performances of Alexander Hamilton, in addition to reading the lyrics before paraphrasing and summarizing. And finally, they will be analyzing characteristics of the two videos of Miranda's performances, mainly looking for the difference between the spoken word version and the full cast performance of the same song. We have several texts students will be using for this lesson, including Lin-Manuel Miranda performs Alexander Hamilton at the White House, which is a YouTube video. Grammys 2016 with Lin-Manuel Miranda and the cast of Hamilton performing the same song, which teachers can find on the Verge website. There is a book, Hamilton the Revolution, where students will find the lyrics to the songs. There's a CD, the Hamilton musical soundtrack, and an optional Disney Plus performance that teachers can choose whether or not they would like to have the class watch that. Lots of materials will be utilized in this lesson as well, including the culminating task checklist for this unit, the culminating task progress tracker. There is an Alexander Hamilton Act 1 notice and wonder note taking tool, the Alexander Hamilton unit text list, a conventions reference guide, and there are also two different question sets that teachers can use. One is for the Disney Plus performance. So there's a film question set if teachers opt to have the class watch that. And there's also a regular section 1 question set that teachers can use regardless of whether or not the class watches that Disney Plus performance. All right, so our lesson view for section 1, lesson 1 is we will preview the culminating task and explore the central question: how do storytellers use primary sources? In activity 1, the class discusses the unit's central and framing questions, then reflects on the central question's significance by completing a quick write in their learning logs. The purpose of this activity is to make sure students understand the unit's end goal. Some suggested supports are to engage students with a class-generated KWL chart or have students independently complete anticipatory guides about Hamilton, either the musical or the individual, that they can revisit later to evaluate how well they understood the material. I think a KWL anchor chart would make a great addition to the classroom environment. Students could use sticky notes to contribute what they know and want to know about Hamilton, again, the individual or the musical, and add to the chart throughout the unit as they learn more about him. So there is a great suggestion in the curriculum to resist the temptation to front load background and contextual information about Alexander Hamilton before beginning the musical. So it's okay if students don't know Alexander Hamilton's life story at this point. Again, the goal is for students to build their own understanding in an authentic way as they read the text. For engagement, teachers set the tone and get excited about the unit because who doesn't like Hamilton? Like, really. In activity two, students review the culminating task checklist individually and jot down notes in response to the first set of questions, which are the larger questions on the screen. So, just in case you're unfamiliar with the culminating task, students will write a personal essay in which they reflect on the creative process they and their group engaged in while creating their original song lyrics. Explain their group's choices regarding the incorporation of primary and secondary sources. In their essay, they must be sure to do the following: explain the choices their group made concerning primary source influences when creating their original song lyrics. Compare their original song lyrics to one of Lin-Manuel Miranda's songs that influenced their group or that they used as a model. They'll also discuss challenges they encountered while their group was writing their original song lyrics and evaluate the effectiveness of their group's choices in achieving their purpose. So, for this activity, students will be going over this culminating task checklist with a small group, and they're working together to determine what skills and knowledge they need to succeed on the culminating task. And they'll also respond to the second set of questions, which are the questions on the bottom of the screen. The group then creates a checklist in their learning log or uses the culminating task progress checker to note what they need to know and be able to do to succeed on the culminating task. They are assessing how prepared they are for each type of knowledge and skill. So, the purpose of this activity is metacognition and setting students up to progress monitor themselves. By identifying and self evaluating initial mastery levels, students can focus on the skills and knowledge they need to build. Suggested supports: have students complete the checklist at the beginning of the unit and after each section diagnostic. The teacher could collect throughout the unit to monitor how students are evaluating their progress, then use this information to make instructional decisions based on student needs. You should also see the teacher circulating as students are discussing this checklist, and supporting groups in unpacking the prompt and evaluation criteria as needed. They could ask probing questions and also wrap up this activity with a whole class discussion to make sure students clearly understand the task. Activity three is not really an activity. I could see this just as easily being a display in the classroom, which would be a great addition to the classroom environment. Basically, students are going over the unit text list just so they can see the different texts that they'll be reading throughout the unit, different resources available. So I would suggest collaborating with the campus ILS, seeing what texts we have available that kind of relate to the unit and setting up some type of display in the classroom. For activity four, the class watches Lin-Manuel Miranda's performance at the White House Poetry Evening and adds responses to their Act One Notice and Wonder note taking tool to track their observations, thoughts, and questions as they watch and listen to the video. They are looking for what seems interesting or important, what does it make me think about, or what connections can I make, and what am I curious about. After watching, the teacher facilitates a whole class discussion in which students share their observations first, thoughts second, and questions last. The purpose of this activity is building background knowledge and gathering evidence to respond to the question, who is Alexander Hamilton? Also, in this video, Miranda explains to the audience that he has this idea for a musical about Hamilton. So this is pre-Hamilton frenzy. Some suggested supports. This is a tool that they will use multiple times throughout the unit. So if this is the student's first time using it, I would expect to see the teacher modeling how to complete it by doing a think aloud, especially since there is no page for this first video. So as I said, it is a great opportunity for the teacher to create an anchor chart and use that to model. Or it can be a guided practice activity in which the class listens to the song and completes the chart together. Moving on to activity 5. The class watches the Grammy Awards performance of Alexander Hamilton and adds responses to the Alexander Hamilton section of the Notice and Wonder note taking tool to track their observations, thoughts, and questions. While they do this, they should be thinking about the questions on the screen. The teacher then facilitates another whole class discussion in which students share their observations first, thoughts second, and questions last. So the purpose is for students to understand how the full musical version of the song contributes to understanding the lyrics and plot. So they should be thinking about what did they notice during this video that was unclear in the spoken word performance. A suggested support is to provide sentence stems and opportunities to turn and talk with peers before discussing whole group. Suggested extension. I can't imagine a classroom in which not one student has seen Hamilton. So, if there are students in the room who know the answers to these questions, the teacher should encourage them to be the experts in the room. Only about this one song, though. No spoilers about the rest of the musical. Another suggested support: if there are questions that can't be answered and there is technology available, the teacher can encourage students to search for an answer to the question online. If it will be answered later, they can have students put an asterisk next to it. Right. In this optional activity that can be used instead of or in addition to the Grammy performance, the class views and discusses the song Alexander Hamilton from the first 5 minutes of the film stage production of Hamilton. Again, students use the note taking tool to track their observations, thoughts, and questions while thinking about the top two questions, the larger questions on the screen. Then, as a class, they discussed the respond questions at the bottom. In activity 7, the class works together to review the definitions of independent versus dependent clauses and the punctuation that is used to separate them using their conventions reference guide if they need additional support. There is clear gradual release here, beginning with the class rewriting lines from Alexander Hamilton in prose, using semicolons to separate closely related independent clauses and adding words as needed for clarity. I would expect to see teacher modeling here. Next, students work with a partner to repeat the process with a new set of lines before finally trying it on their own. So that is the gradual release. They do it with the teacher modeling, then they work with a partner, finally they try it on their own. Then the teacher wraps up the activity by having students consider the question on the screen. How does writing this into prose affect your understanding of the plot or characters? Share your thoughts in a whole class discussion. So, the purpose of this activity is that it is setting students up to be successful in writing their own songs later. Because if you can turn poetry into prose, you can turn prose into poetry. A suggested support is the teacher can review the difference between poetry and prose. This should be quick, not a mini lesson. Provide definitions and maybe one or two examples of prose and poetry. The teacher should also be intentional about who they are pairing together to work on this activity. Or instead of pairs, they can also have students work in groups of 3. Right, and now the cub for section 1, lesson 1. I do my cub backwards, starting with the product. So for this product, I thought about what students would be producing in this lesson that aligns with the lesson's goals. Specifically, which questions do they need to be able to answer by the end of the lesson? I made sure I started with my cognitive verb, analyze, included an ELP, discuss, the knowledge, which is the question about Alexander Hamilton, and the student product, which is the note taking tool. So I have students will be able to analyze characteristics of the 2 videos of Miranda's performances of Alexander Hamilton using the Notice and Wonder note taking tool to discuss 2 questions. What do you learn about Alexander Hamilton, and what characters are you introduced to in this song? From there, I jumped to the know and asked myself, what basic or factual knowledge do students need to know in order to answer these questions? They need to know who Alexander Hamilton was. Finally, I addressed what it is that I would like students to understand about the content or why they need to know who Alexander Hamilton was. Okay, so I have they understand how the full musical version of the song Alexander Hamilton differs from the spoken word performance and contributes to understanding the lyrics and plot. Right, that's a wrap for this video. I welcome your feedback and look forward to hearing from you either on Twitter, via email, or in the comments. While you're here, don't forget to subscribe so you never have to worry about missing a video. Thanks for watching.